Right. So after you start, the AutoML natural language, in my case, I use a new project. You can very much still use the same project that you were using. What I did before was sort of a excuse to show you how to delete a project that you were not using and how to, just create a new one and activate the billing will be activated. Just you have to enable the API for just for working with this. Also, when you start working, you're gonna have to give some permissions like you did before. I guess that this is very similar to what you did before last week with AutoML tables. So I tried different data sets for our class. uh, I was I was trying to work with Amazon reviews, but the data set took just way too long for the class. So I got this happiness, which is also is coming from Kaggle, and so I think it's gonna be a good file for our class. Now, what we're doing here is that I'm going to do a multi-level classification process. Uh, then I will show you later sentiment analysis. So the way it works is this: you have to create a new data set. So when you start, this has to be empty. For example, you're going to click something like reviews or whatever name you want to assign to this, in the same fashion as you did before last week with tables. Now, in this case, you will have three objectives, and this is going to be new. For example, in this data set that is called happiness, what I have is, I'm not sure, I will show you the data set later. What I have are different text. You have a set of text, about 13,000 different rows, and everyone has a label to it, whether the person was happy or sad or whatever category. So that fit within the multi-level classification process. Yeah? If you have only one label to classify, let's say yes, no, is going to buy, not buy, or this person is happy or sad, then you're going to pick a single label classification. And for sentiment analysis, what we have to do is that we have to work with scores. So this is what it say here. So you have to have every text has to have a score for this. So I will show you how the data set looks like, so you know exactly how to prepare this. All right. So this is a happiness data set. As you can see, every row has to have the text that you want to use. I found quite a bit of trouble when you have special characters in the text. So, in other words, this has to be clean. I found way too much trouble when you have special characters into this. So maybe if you have, I imagine with tweets and things like that, you might be able to, or emoticons, you might have to just clean them and replace some values for this to work. Okay. So far is not that good. But the whole process is really easy. So I have to have in one column, I have to have the text I want to understand or recognize. So please notice that there are no titles in the column. So we just start right away with the first text. That's important. So if you're using data prep, Google Data Prep will by default is replacing or eliminating the title for a column. So there is an option in data prep, so you can keep it. So you can just go from data prep and you will get this, and then after this, your file will be ready. Just make sure that this is clean. Now in the second column, you have to have the labels. So remember, I need to train the machine, and for that I have to have the labels. So far, I have to do the labels before the process. There is a new service by the Google Cloud that will attempt to generate labels for you, but that's the third service. It's also AutoML. It's called AutoML Labels, and that will do the labeling for you. But in this exercise, we have to have the label. So if you have, let's say, and this is the same case for almost everything, you have images, videos, so you have to labeling is a very important process because that's how the machine is going to learn. Now, so I'm going back. So this is going to be a multi-label classification. And in here you can specify, the file. If you have the file in cloud storage, if you are working with a big file, then it has to be in cloud storage. Just notice the path of the file. So I will probably go here. We say natural language, and right here, and I will upload the file that I want to. Let me see. I think it's this one. Yeah, and then I just can refer to that file, and I can refer to that file using the right here, like happiness of CSV. All right, I already did that, so I'm not going to do it again. When you create a data set, it will take a little bit of time. If you unfortunately, if your data is not clean, you will find out at the end of the importing process. So in other words, you may be wasting a lot of time just to know at the end that the data was not clean. Now, ask me how do I know that, and I will tell you how I know that you have to wait half an hour until you know that there is a problem with the file. You know. All right. So every label should have at least 100 items. It's not required; it's recommended, but I suggest you stick by this. And I will click cancel because I already did that. It's a very time consuming process. So now this is the file I have, which is really nice. So it's called happiness. It's a multi-level classification. Then I click in the data, and now I will follow the process as I did with the AutoML tables. Now, look, this is what I was looking for. These are the labels. Yeah, achievement, affection, bonding, enjoying the moment. I can add more labels. I can do labels myself. I can, let's say, I can click on one of these. Let's suppose I just want to add more of affection, and I can add items to this. If you don't do this, you have to do the labeling by hand, which is a pain. Like for example, you will click on label, then you want to start checking. You have to, check every single one and put the label yourself, which is not it's not fun. So I will just prefer that the labels are coming before you do the process. So in other words, it's the same principle as always. Your data should be prepared, should be clean, should be ready to go. So just notice, the labels, very few of them. So I have 7 labels, that I need to use to predict. So the idea is that when I select or I type one of these texts or something similar, it doesn't have to be so like for example, I got employed, or I got a job offer. So it will say something. It will label that as an achievement, and then after that, you're gonna decide what to do with it. So that's pretty cool. In the way it works. Quite a bit. Now let's go to the training part, which is the second step in the process. Now, based on experience, and I'm telling you that it took me several interactions to do this, preparing the data set, going back and forth. Maybe not with this happiness that's coming from an example, but I was working with reviews, and it took an awful amount of time just preparing data. Even getting here, just to making sure that the data was in columns. We only had 2 columns. There were no, weird characters into it. Just took an awful amount of time. All right. So as you can see, you have to have ideally 100 text items per labels. You might want to have more than that. The more the better. And then the text the data is going to be split, as we know, into different partitions, training, tests, and so forth. So then I'm gonna click start training. So this process, I have 12,000 items with 7 labels. So I'll put this happiness. I'll call it one. I'm keeping track of this. This is the first time I'm running the training with this particular data set. So I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm guessing about 10 to 15 minutes perhaps. So just sit tight. This is something that you might want to do at the beginning of the class. So by the time we start, using it, your model should be ready.